Hey, everybody. This is Jets Chaos. I'm Jeremy, and I'm here to, I don't know, get some freaking reality going here, because it's not very realistic right now. Um, Twitter is the main culprit. Let me tell you what's going on, Jet fans. We find a way to fight about everything, and we are the worst at fighting. Like, the way we do it is just lying, just close-minded, completely extreme to one side. Once we feel something, there's no room for anything else, to the point where we're lying. We're pretending we know things about players that we don't know. Either that, I have to assume it's pretending, because either that, or there are people out there who have never watched the game of football and have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. I mean, you really, really cannot be serious about some of the takes that are going out there. Let me get specific. I'm talking about this fight over who we should draft. And some of the main things is there's three major sides to this, right? There's the offensive line people, there is the wide receiver people, if it's like a Dunze or something like that. There is the Bowers people, if he's there, the Bowers people. And then there's a lot of those people from all three of those components that are completely willing to trade back. Okay, so we're not going to talk about that. Very few people are arguing that that's against that. Most people, logical people, I don't have a problem with. There's not like people going crazy saying you can't trade back a few spots. I think a lot of people understand the value of getting a second round pick. A lot of people understand that you could still at 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 still get an impact player who could help us this year and add a second round pick that can also help, or add depth. And that's what I want to talk about. People are thinking, because we filled all these spots, there's arguments that we don't need it. We don't need an offensive lineman because they're not going to play. Well, you could say the same thing for wide receiver. We don't need a wide receiver because they're not going to play. I mean, they will, because they could be WR3, but it depends on the receiver, right? Because we run a lot of 12 personnel. There's only two receivers on the field. So that's going to be a lot of reps where the first round pick is not going to play. You can make an argument about Bowers at tight end. People could say, well, we have two good tight ends. Do we have tight ends that are that level? That's another discussion. The other argument for tight end, I know it's like that's the most beat up one. The other argument for Bowers and tight end is, as far as getting a guy who contributes right away, we run a lot of 12 personnel. So a lot of people saying he'd be tight end 3. Maybe he wouldn't, because there's more similarity between Ruckert and Conklin than there is between Ruckert, Conklin, and Bowers. It's a very good chance, and this would frustrate me from, honestly, we all know how I love Ruckert, but I think it would really mean less snaps for Ruckert. Because I think what you would see is a lot of 12 personnel where you'd have Bowers and Conklin on the field, Breece Hall in the backfield, Mike Williams and Garrett Wilson as the two wide out receivers. A lot of 12 personnel like that. You can also line Bowers up as fullback and have two in the backfield and have a 2-1 personnel with Conklin up front. You can, in the early downs, use Ruckert instead of Conklin. If you believe in him as a blocker, as a better run blocker, I think he is. Lots of different things you can do. So does that mean, so the people saying that Bowers wouldn't add something to the team, I kind of question that. Now, I'm not saying the offensive line wouldn't add to the team is also kind of silly. Because whether we traded back and took one of those crazy good interior linemen, or whether we took one of these tackles like Latham or Fuaga, let's face it, do we honestly believe that our offensive line is going to, all 5 players that we have on paper starting right now, are going to start all 17 games and stay healthy? And who do you trust coming off of our bench to replace any of those players? And now let's go back to the draft. If we get a center like Powers, suddenly you could move Tippmann over and put Powers in there if somebody gets hurt. I know on day one, he might not be playing. He might not be in there. And that might make a lot of you angry. We picked a guy who's not playing. But realistically, when we talk about all in for next year, We're going to need and utilize another more offensive lineman, probably two. Probably there'll be games where someone on the interior will go down. There'll be games on where a tackle goes down. Hopefully it won't be any more than that. But there's every argument, every right for someone to say, I want to take an offensive lineman, especially if it's a guy like Fashanu, for example, or even the other guys, because I believe that we need the depth. But not only that, are we going to totally ignore the future? Are we going to pretend that we're just going to live year to year completely and not ever think about finally starting to build a core on this team that could last a long, long time? The offensive line needs more of a core. So that's a good argument to take offensive line. And I totally see the other side. We need another weapon. How can we take offensive line? We could take some guys in the back end. We could try to trust Karan Warren to be our backup tackle. We could sign Connor McGovern, and he could come in at center, and you can move Tippmann over. There's arguments there, too. And it's the same thing if we take wide receiver. Same argument to take a wide receiver. Mike Williams is a one-year deal, and then he's gone. What do you do for the future? And a guy like Adunze might be able to help us now when we do a 12 not a 12, an 11 personnel, a 10 personnel. We would have him out there. Do we want Lazard to be our wide receiver 3? Are we going to sign someone else in free agency? We don't know. Maybe we're going to sign an offensive lineman in free agency. The point is there is no disgusting or ugly take here. There is just differences of opinion. Now, I'm about to release, and I'm going to release a video that shows how far Jet fans are willing to go. Because the lies on Twitter and the lies that are going on YouTube right now by people who are repeating things on Twitter that clearly either, hopefully that's what it was, they're just repeating things on Twitter, and not that they actually watch film and are saying these things about Brock Bowers. Absolute nonsense is out there. We have this nonsense where people are saying you can't block. Well, you didn't watch the film, or you're blind. And I'm going to show that because it's absolutely ridiculous to say that Brock Bowers cannot block. Is he a normal inline blocker? No, because he's not used that way. And guess what? When he was serviceable because, yeah, there were times where he didn't block well, and there were times where he did. And you could make that case for any tight end prospect in college right now. Also, in-space blocker, he's not only okay, he's elite. He's excellent. He's a phenomenal out-in-space blocker. Phenomenal. People are criticizing his physique. What? He's a Hulk. He's only 20, 21 years old. What do you think? He's not going to fill out more and be bigger? You're worried about his weight? Look at his size. Look at his frame. He's a mismatch. He's a complete mismatch when he goes out as a receiver. If you cover him with a defensive back, he towers over them and will run over them. If you try to cover him with a linebacker, they can't keep up with him, which is why he's so wide open. And people are trying to use that as a critique. They're trying to take it as a reason why he makes plays because he's wide open. Yes, because he gets wide open, because he's a fantastic route runner. And if you're saying he's not a great route runner, you've never watched football and don't know what route running is. Or you just are listening to people on Twitter who are lying because they want to be right or they don't want to take a tight end. Look, I'm not saying that the people who are pro Bowers aren't doing the same thing. The lies about Fuaga are unbelievable. Some schmuck took 2 plays where he lost the rep and said, this is who he is. They took 2 plays from an entire football game. They didn't show you every other play of the game where he completely dominated the defensive line. They didn't show you when he went up against Latu, one of the top edges in the draft who's going to be a top 15 pick most likely, and he was completely owned and dominated by Fuaga. They didn't bother showing you that because everybody needs to win their arguments, even if it means bashing a player and saying stupid, untrue things. Let me give you the reality. There are a bunch of really good tackles in this draft. Latham, for one, is good because he could play guard or tackle. So if you grab him, he could be a backup tackle, but also he'd be a phenomenal guard. You could just tell by looking at his skill set. Fashanu, left tackle or right tackle. Love it. And then there's guys like Mims. He's kind of fragile, seems to get hurt a lot. Got 1 year to play, was hurt, came back for the combines, supposedly just a minor tweak of his hamstring, wasn't ready for his pro day, couldn't play. That concerns me. Guy finally got healthy, and then he can't run a 40 without tweaking his hamstring to the point where now he can't play in his pro day. So now you got 7 games of film on the kid, and you got only part of his workout from the combines, and you don't get to see him during his pro day, right? So there's questions about some of the other guys, but there's a lot of good tackles. Fontenot, he could definitely be a guard, potentially a tackle. His arm lengths were like 36 inches, so he could definitely, supposedly, should be able to play tackle. A lot of good potential guys. Now, I will say this. Every single one of them can bust. Brock Bowers can bust. Latham could bust. Fashanu can bust. They can all potentially bust. Adunze could bust. They can all bust. Why? Because one thing I learned over 40 years of watching the NFL is that anyone could bust. Anyone. We've seen players we cannot believe became busts. We thought they were going to be phenomenal, and they weren't. So no one is a guarantee. We can only go by what we see. So I will come out with those. I don't know if you can call this a rant, but grow up, Jet fans. Can we all just respect everybody's take? There's an argument for every pick out there. There's an argument. Let JD do his job. Let him do his job. This is one of the best rosters I've seen on paper that we've had forever, in years. One of the best rosters ever. Let the guy do his job. He had a spectacular offseason. We can go in almost any direction in the draft. He did that for us. Appreciate that. Be excited about the draft, but stop sitting there trying to bash players and say things you don't know unless you have some evidence to back it up. And that means watch the film, tell me the game, tell me the time. I got the games, I got the film. I'll look it up and I'll say you're right if you're right. I will, because I'm not looking to spread lies here or misinformation. I'm simply looking as a Jet fan to share information. And the information I'm going to share with you right now is there are good prospects in lots of positions, and we're in a place where we can take the best player on our board, regardless of the position. Hopefully we trade down, though. Want the second round pick. And that's all I got to say about that. Thank you, Jet fans. Be good, be cool, relax, enjoy the draft. Enjoy this season. We're winning 12 or more games. We're winning a playoff game. We're probably going to the AFC East Championship game, and we're going to be having a good chance to go to the Super Bowl. You heard it right here first. If you haven't heard it anywhere else, be good. Let's go Jets, baby.